Have you been to confession? Yes. They walked slowly down the valley. And you forgave and were forgiven? Yes. Oh, but my punishment is burdensome. But once it is completed, you will find solace, I assume. Oh, I hope. Have you started to realize that your church fails to satisfy you? No, I will not say that. But you know it. Your intelligence has opened a window somewhere, and the truth has seeped in. Please do not take away my religion, sir. Her eyes and voice pleaded with him, and he embraced her initial admission of vulnerability with a surge of triumphant affection. My love, he said, I would give you more than I took from you. No, never, even if we were not enemies, and I had not made that terrible vow. My religion has been everything to me. At this moment, I have many things that torment me, and I have asked so little of religion before. My life has been so tranquil that now I hardly know how to ask for so much more. I will learn. Leave me in peace. Do you want me to leave? He asked. If you did, if my presence troubled you, I believe I would depart. However, I know it would be futile. I would return. No, no. I do not want you to leave. I would feel, I must admit to you, like a house without its foundation. And yet at times I pray for you to go. Oh, I do not like life. I used to take pride in my intelligence. Where is my pride now? What good has the knowledge in my books done me when I confess my reliance on a man, and that man my enemy, whom I barely know for a few weeks? She was speaking incoherently, and Melendez was irritated by the presence of the servant so near them. Tell me, she exclaimed, what is it in you that I desire, that I need? It is something that belongs to me. Give it to me and depart. Selina, I give it to you willingly, God knows, but you must also take me. You desire in me what is similar to you and what you will not find anywhere else. However, I cannot separate my soul from my body. You must take both, or neither. Oh, I cannot, you know that I cannot. I disregard your reasons. But I do not. You will, my beloved, or if you do not disregard them, you will forget them. When I am dead, I wish I were. She was excited and trembling. The confession had been a trial, and Melendez was never calming. She wanted to hold on to him, but she still had control over herself. He understood her desire and linked her arm with his, crossing it over his chest. He opened her hand and kissed her palm. Then he leaned his face close to hers. She was trembling violently. Her face was frantic and pale. His own face was pale, and the heart beneath her arm beat quickly. I love you deeply, he said. Do you believe that, Selina? Oh, Mother of God, please don't. I cannot listen. But you will listen. Cast aside your superstitions and come to me. Keep the parts of your religion that are not superstition. I would be the last to take them away from you. However, I will not allow its trivial doctrines to come between us. As for your customs, you don't even have the excuse of filial duty. Your father would not forbid you from becoming my wife. And I love you very sincerely and passionately. Just how much I could convey to you if we were alone. He had to control himself greatly, but his seriousness was unmistakable. When such scientific jesters do find a woman worth loving, they are too deeply aware of the fact not to be moved to their core, and their core is often in great disproportion to their usual light-heartedness. Come to me, he continued. I need you, and I will be as caring and considerate a husband as I will be passionate as a lover. You love me, so stop fooling yourself. Can you imagine finding any happiness in a solitary life devoted to illusions, when you could have it all here in my embrace? Oh, be quiet. You have the power to make me do whatever you want. I have no control over myself anymore. What is this incredible influence? It's the magnetic force of love, that's all. I'm not using any evil power over you. Listen, I won't bother you anymore for now. I have to go to Los Angeles the day after tomorrow, and when I come back to Seal Bay in about 2 weeks, I'll visit you again. Then we'll talk, but let me warn you, I will only accept one answer. You are mine, and I will have you. They arrived at Casa Grande a moment later, and she managed to escape from him and ran to her room. But she couldn't bear to be alone. Quickly changing out of her black dress, she grabbed the first one she saw, which happened to be a bright red dress that made her look pale as a ghost. She returned to the living room, not to dance even a square contradance, but to stand surrounded by adoring gentlemen with curly hair tied with colorful ribbons and jewels on their clothes. Carminia looked at her with a bitter jealousy that was turning from anger to resentment. How could a woman with golden hair dare to wear the color of brunettes? It was stealing. It was the ultimate insult. And once again, she kept Samboro by her side, in the absence of Melendez. And deep in Salia's heart, a plan for revenge took shape. The materials for it had unknowingly been provided by her honorable father-in-law. Melendez lingered in the living room for a few moments after Selina reappeared, then exited the house and strolled through the area in the courtyard, where people were dancing, singing, eating, and gambling, as if there would be no tomorrow. He continued on through the quiet town to the amusement park of Casa Grande, which was located approximately half a mile from the house. He had only been there for a short while when he heard a rustle, a light footstep. Turning around, he saw Selina approaching him, alone, her exposed neck and golden hair shining against the darkness, her long dress trailing behind her. She was swiftly making her way towards him. His heart raced, and he eagerly reached out his arms towards her, but she gestured for him to stay back. "Please," she said, "I am alone. I didn't bring anyone with me because what I have to tell you must not be heard by anyone else." He stepped back and looked down at the ground. "Listen," she continued. "I couldn't wait until tomorrow because every moment wasted could potentially ruin your career, and your messenger hasn't left yet. Right now, I'll tell you the other thing first. Dear God, I can't believe I'm betraying my own brother to my enemy. But it feels like the right thing to do because you trusted me, and I would feel like I betrayed you if I didn't warn you. I don't know. Oh my goodness, I don't know. But this feels right to me. The other night my brother came to me and asked me, 'Oh, don't look at me,' to marry you, so that you wouldn't obstruct his ambitions any longer. He wants to become a deputy in Mexico, and he knows that you won't allow it. I thought my mind would shatter. An iturbi y sala." I didn't respond to him. There was no response to a demand like that, and he left me in a fit of rage, vowing revenge against you. Tonight, just a few moments ago, he whispered to me that he knew about your plans, your intentions regarding the Americans. He had overheard a conversation between you and Machado. He says that he will send letters to Mexico tomorrow, warning the government against you. Then their suspicions will be aroused and they will inquire. Oh, Mary. Melendez clenched his teeth. "Oh, my God," he exclaimed. She saw that he had forgotten about her. She turned and went back more quickly than she had come. Melendez was a man whose resources never failed him. He returned to the house and asked Samboro to smoke a cigarette and drink a bottle of wine in his room. Then, without making any promises or saying anything that could compromise him, he flattered that shallow young man so much. He enticed his ambition and indulged his vanity and nurtured his hopes, that fear and hatred were amazed at their own existence, closed their eyes, and went to sleep. Samboro poured out his aspirations, which, under the influence of the truth-inducing wine, turned out to be an honest yearning for the pleasures of Mexico. As he got up to leave, he put his arm around Melendez's neck. "Oh, my friend, he cried. "You are all-powerful. Only you can give me what I want." "Why didn't you ever ask me for what you wanted?" asked Melendez, and he thought, if it weren't for her, you would be on your way to Los Angeles tonight charged with high treason. I wouldn't have gone to this much trouble for you. Chapter 24. A rodeo was held the following day, marking the end of the celebrations, Don Hernandez seizing the opportunity presented by the gathering of the ranchers. It was scheduled to take place at Cerros Ranch, which was adjacent to Rocas Ranch. We arrived early, with many of us getting off our horses and heading towards the platform situated on one side of the circular rodeo arena. The cowboys were already riding swiftly over the hills, shouting and hollering at the cattle, who obediently ran to them like loyal pets. Soon, a herd came thundering down into the enclosure, where they were forcefully brought down and marked with a branding iron. The stray cattle that belonged to nearby ranchers were separated and placed in a pen. This occurred repeatedly, with the interest and excitement growing with each gathering. Once a bull, seizing an opportunity, broke free from its herd and charged down the valley. A cowboy began to pursue it. However, Samboro, eager to showcase his horse-riding skills and still on his horse, called out to the cowboy to stop and then raced after the animal, grabbing hold of its tail. He spurred his horse forward, released the tail at the perfect moment, and amidst cries of, "Take that! Take that!" the bull was humiliatingly rolled in the dirt, then obediently followed Samboro back to the rodeo grounds. After the meal beneath the trees, most of the group returned to the platform, but Melendez, Aiden, Selena, Carminia, and I wandered around the ranch. Aiden walked beside Selena, more loyal than her shadow. Carminia's intense black eyes communicated their message so clearly to Melendez's that he couldn't have abandoned her without being impolite, and Melendez was never impolite. "Aiden," Selena said suddenly, "I am tired of you. Sit under that tree until I return. I want to walk alone with Eustaquia for a while." Aiden sighed and did as he was told, finding solace in a small cigar. Taking a different path from the one the others took, we walked a considerable distance discussing ordinary topics, both avoiding the subject of Jose Melendez by mutual agreement. And yet I was convinced that beneath the surface she was thinking about him, even as she spoke coherently to me. On our way back, the conversation faded due to a lack of substance, and as chance would have it, we were both silent as we approached a small adobe hut. As we turned the corner, we came upon Melendez and Carminia. He had just lowered his head and kissed her. Carminia ran away like a scared rabbit. Melendez turned pale as a ghost, and I knew that he was feeling shocked. I felt the coldness of Selena as she stood up straight like a statue and slowly walked away. "Jose, you are a fool," I exclaimed when she couldn't hear us anymore. "You don't need to tell me that," he said angrily. "But what in the world? Well, never mind. Please resolve this with her. Explain to her what men are. Tell her that the modern woman is everywhere. No, don't tell her that. Tell her that history is full of examples of men who have given one woman their lifelong love and yet have been unfaithful to her every week of the year. Explain to her that a man who loves one woman must love all women, and she has enough evidence that I love her and no one else. I want to marry her, not Carminia Menendez. I will certainly be faithful to her once I have her. I couldn't be any other way. But I don't need to explain this to you. Sort things out with her. She is intelligent and can understand." I shook my head. You can't reason with someone who lacks experience, especially when combined with jealousy. Oh my goodness. Her ideal, of course, is perfection and doesn't consider human flaws. You have fallen short of that today. I'm afraid your chances are slim. They are not. Do you think I will give her up for something trivial like that? But why not accept this breakup? You can't marry her. Oh, don't bring up that nonsense, he exclaimed harshly. I will discard her traditions when the time comes, just like peeling the outer shells of a nut. Go, Eustaquia. Of course I left. Selena wasn't at the rodeo, but she had gone home with her father. I followed right away, and when I arrived at Casa Grande, I found her sitting in her library. I had never seen someone resemble a statue more closely. Her face was frozen, only her eyes revealed the torment within her soul. But she appeared as unchanging as destiny. "Selena," I exclaimed, unsure of where to begin, "please be rational. Men like Melendez, with his intellect and passionate, affectionate nature, are always vulnerable when it comes to women. But it doesn't mean anything. He doesn't care about Carminia Menendez. He's deeply in love with you. And his vulnerability, my dear, stems from the same qualities that make him charming. He wouldn't be the man he is without them. His heart would be less kind, his impulses less generous, his mind less powerful, and his sympathies less instinctive and genuine. The strong and impervious man, the man who isn't tempted by vice and isn't attacked by weakness, who is loyal effortlessly, such a man lacks breadth, magnetism, and the ability to understand the human heart and empathize with both its noble desires and its terrible flaws. I've never known such men to not possess petty vanities, egotism, and contemptible weaknesses, which Melendez couldn't possibly have. No one can be perfect, and it's the man of great strength and great weakness who truly comprehends and sympathizes with human nature, who is lovable and charismatic, and who has the power to awaken the highest and most passionate love in a woman. Such men cause immense suffering, but they can provide a happiness that makes the suffering worthwhile. You won't find another man like Jose Melendez. Don't dismiss him so easily. Do I understand? Selina said in a completely unaffected tone, "that you're advising me to marry a Melendez and the man who would condemn me to eternal damnation. Have you forgotten my vow?" I snapped back to reality with a jolt. In the midst of my passionate defense, I had neglected to consider the current circumstances. "Please pardon him," I uttered weakly. "I hold no grudge against him," she replied. "He means nothing to me." I understood that it would be futile to engage in a debate with her. "I have a favor to ask," she stated. "Most of our visitors will depart this afternoon. Would you allow me to sleep by myself tonight?" I longed to embrace her and offer her the empathy of a fellow woman, but I lacked the courage. The only action I could take was to leave her in solitude. Chapter 25. Casa Grande housed 3 envious women. The situation had its comedic aspect, but was tragic enough for those involved. In the evening, the remaining guests of the house and the neighbors from the town gathered as usual for the dance. Only Melendez was absent. Carminia stood her ground. She would not attend as long as Melendez stayed away. Selina moved confidently among her guests, and had never been more charming. Carminia dared not make eye contact with her or with me, but upon noticing Salia observing her, she sought to increase the bride's unease to alleviate her own. That fateful night, she flirted imperiously with Samboro like never before, and Samboro, who was a collection of man's vanity, devoted himself to the captivating beauty. Her cheeks flushed with excitement, her eyes were restless and gleaming. The music ceased. The women indulged in the sweets passed by the Native American servants. The men had not yet entered the dining room. Carminia dropped her handkerchief. As Samboro bent down to retrieve it, he kissed her hand behind its delicate concealment. Suddenly, Salia stood up. She glided down the room in her long gown, with everyone staring at her stern eyes and tightly pressed lips. Her small head, adorned with a tall comb, held high and rigid. She walked directly to Samboro and slapped his ears in front of the assembled company. "You will no longer flirt with other women," she declared in a loud and clear voice. "You are my husband, and you won't forget it again. Come with me." And in the midst of the silence of mountaintops during a snowstorm, he stumbled to his feet and followed her out of the room. I couldn't sleep that night. Despite finding amusement in Salia's sudden takeover, I was overwhelmed by the cold and ominous feeling that seemed to emanate from Selina and fill the house. I knew that this eerie calm was akin to the unsettling stillness before an earthquake. What would she do during the impending upheaval? I trembled and tortured myself with various thoughts. I became so anxious that I got up, dressed, and went out onto the corridor to pace back and forth. It was very late, and the moon had risen, but the corners were dark. Figures appeared to emerge from them, but my nerves were strong. I had never succumbed to fear. My mind wandered to Melendez. Who can truly understand the complex heart of a man? The deep, intense, and enduring devotion he may have for the one woman he recognizes as his soulmate, yet the peculiar and unpredictable wanderings of his imagination, the nomadic expression of his primal instincts, the passionate love he may feel for this woman above all others, yet the distance with which he always keeps her, never truly knowing her as well as he has known other women, the ultimate test of true love, passion without sensuality. And yet, the regret that she doesn't satisfy every aspect of his nature, even though he wouldn't want her to. The lamentation for the profound incongruity of human nature, the blending of the animalistic and the divine, which cannot find fulfillment in the same woman. No matter how intense her fire, she cannot satiate the instincts that rage beneath man's passion without sacrificing the purity of mind that he adores in her. She, too, feels a vague longing for some part of his nature that remains a mystery to her, forever beyond her understanding. But his regret is nothing compared to his. He knows, and she does not. My thoughts were abruptly interrupted. I heard a door being opened stealthily. I knew even before turning that the door belonged to Selina's room, the last one at the end of the right wing. It opened, and she emerged. It was as if only her face appeared. She was covered from head to toe in black attire, and her face was as pale as the moon. Consumed by an unnamed but overpowering fear, I turned the handle of the nearest door and nearly stumbled into the room. I closed the door behind me, but there was no lock. Through the sliver of light entering between the partially open shutters, I saw that I was in Carminia Menendez's room. However, she slept soundly and did not hear me. I stood motionless, listening for several minutes. At first there was no sound. Evidently I had startled her, and she was waiting for the house to regain its silence. Finally, I heard someone gliding down the corridor. Then, suddenly, I realized that she was approaching this room, and driven by a dreadful curiosity and mounting terror, I sank to my knees in a corner. The door opened silently, and Selina entered. Once again, I only saw her pale face, rigid like death, but her eyes blazed with the intense emotions that her soul had finally unleashed. Then, I noticed another pale object, her hand. However, there was no knife in it. If there had been, I believe I would have shaken off the spell that held me captive. I could never witness a murder. It was the fear of the unknown that paralyzed my muscles. She leaned over Carminia, who stirred restlessly and raised her arms above her head. I saw her touch her finger to the sleeping woman's mouth, inserting it between her lips. Then she stepped back and positioned herself next to the head of the bed, facing the window. She raised herself to her full height and stretched her arms out horizontally. This stance gave her the shape of a cross, a dark cross, topped and pointed with malicious white. One hand was extended above Carminia's face. She was the most horrifying sight I ever witnessed. She made no noise. She barely breathed. Suddenly, with the agility of a panther, her figure glided over the unconscious woman, her open hand making an unusual gesture. Then she disappeared from the room. Carminia woke up, screaming. "Someone has cursed me!" she exclaimed. "Oh, my God! Someone has cursed me!" I hurriedly left the room, only to collapse onto my own bed in a faint. Chapter 26. The following morning, Casa Grande was thrown into chaos. Carminia Menendez was in a raging fever and had to remain in her bed. After breakfast, I called for Melendez and informed him of what I had witnessed. Firstly, I needed to confide in someone, and secondly, I hoped to put an end to his infatuation and prevent any further troubles. "You troublemaker!" I exclaimed, concluding my statement. "Look at the havoc you have caused. Now you must leave, thank goodness, and return only when you are healed." "I will depart for a while," he responded. "Her current state of mind needs to run its course. However, if I already loved her, now I adore her. She is exceptional, a woman with the passions of hell and the kindness of an angel. She is the woman I have longed for my entire life, the only woman I have ever truly known. One day, I will embrace her and let her know that I comprehend her." "Jose," I said, torn between despair and curiosity, "you have fancied numerous women. What sets Selina apart? How can you be certain that this is love? What is your concept of love?" He sat down and was silent for a moment, then spoke reflectively. "Love is not just passion, for one can feel that for many people. Not merely affection, for friendship requires that. Not even sympathy and companionship. One can find those with both men and women. Nor is it everything, for I have experienced it all, yet something was missing. Love is the mysterious connection between two hearts, with the promise of a magnetic harmony, a unique original joy, a profound satisfaction, a certainty of lastingness, which if either heart were to wander the world, it would never find again. It is the understanding that even if the physical body turns to decay, the spirit within will still possess the power to influence the very thing that had been irresistibly drawn to it. It is the knowledge that weakness will only evoke tenderness, never repulsion, as when the imagination rules and the heart slumbers. That flaws will adorn themselves with the individuality of the owner and become treasures to the adoring mind that perceives, but reveres. It is the cultivation of the highest form of selflessness, the intense and enduring desire to sacrifice oneself for the happiness of a beloved one. Above all, it is the impossibility of ceasing to love, regardless of any reason or prudence or jealousy or disapproval or shocking discoveries that may dictate. Let the mind argue with the soul's mate. It will rebound, when all is said and done, like a rubber ball when the pressure of the finger is released. As for Selina, she is the missing piece of me. He departed that day without seeing Selina again. Carminia was in the most extreme delirium for a week. By the end of the second week, every strand of hair on her head, her eyebrows, and her eyelashes had fallen out. She resembled a pale mummy, a ghastly, pitiable caricature of the beautiful woman whose arrows pierced so many hearts. They wrapped her up in a blanket and took her home, and then I went to find Selina, who had hardly left her room and never visited Carminia's. I informed her that I had witnessed the curse and described the outcome. "Do you feel no remorse?" I inquired. "None at all. You have destroyed the beauty, happiness, and fortune of another woman. I have accomplished what I set out to do. Do you realize that once again you have created a barrier between yourself and your religion? You do not appear very repentant. Revenge is more satisfying than religion." Then, in a burst of anger, I admitted that I had informed Melendez. For a moment, I thought her intense hatred was about to unleash its vengeance upon me, but she simply asked, "What did he say?" Reluctantly, I repeated his words, preserving them exactly, and as I spoke, her face softened, the severity disappeared from her features, and an expression of intense gratitude filled her eyes. "Did he really say that, Eustaquia?" "He did. Say it again, please." I complied, and then she covered her face with her hands and wept, and wept, and wept. Chapter 27. At the close of the week, Yolanda Bastaro passed away unexpectedly. She was seated on the verdant bench, distributing charitable acts, when her head gently reclined and the light within her extinguished. Never had a demise been more serene, never had a spirit been better prepared, yet sorrowful lamentation trailed in her wake. Poor Don Hernandez crumbled like a fallen tree, Samboro wept profusely, and Salia found no solace. Selina was off on her horse when the incident occurred, galloping across the hills. Attendants were promptly dispatched to summon her, intercepting her mere hours away from returning home. Upon entering the parlor, Don Hernandez, Samboro, and Salia literally threw themselves upon her, and she stood firm as a boulder, providing them with support. She had loved her mother, but it had always been her fate to support others. She never had a chance to rely on anyone else. All that night and the following day, she was deeply involved with the distressed household, even visiting the grieving Native Americans occasionally. On the second night, she went to the room where her mother lay with the grandeur of candles and crosses, and asked the Indian observers, huddled like vultures around the deceased, to leave for a while. She sat down in a chair next to the lifeless body and marveled at the tranquility in her heart. She didn't feel anything stronger than sorrow. She tried to comprehend the finality of death, realizing that her mother, who had been such a kind influence in her life, was no longer a part of it. However, this knowledge didn't bring any grief. She only felt the need to alleviate the sorrow of others. That was her role. The door opened. She suddenly took a breath. She knew it was Melendez. He sat down beside her, held her hand, and remained silent for hours. Gradually she leaned towards him, without touching him, and eventually tears began to flow. He departed the next morning, but he wrote to her before leaving, and again from Seal Bay, and then from the north. She only replied once, with a single line, but that line was, "Keep writing to me until you forget about me." One day she gave me a package and asked me to deliver it to Carminia. "It's an ointment," she said, "one of old Brigida's, a witch who lived on the cliffs and concocted marvelous remedies from herbs. Tell her to use it and her hair will grow back." And that was the only indication of remorse I was allowed to witness. Then, for a long period, there was no word from Melendez. Chapter 28. Before heading to Mexico, Melendez spent several weeks at his ranches in the north, overseeing the slaughter of his cattle. This annual event was crucial for the Californians' income, as the hides and tallow were traded with foreign shippers. He also had connections with the Russians at Fort Ross and Bodega in the fur trade. However, these sporadic profits were not enough for him. They satisfied his personal needs, but he required a large amount of gold for his ambitious plans. Figuring out how to obtain it was a problem that occupied his mind, along with thoughts of Selina Iturbi y Sala. He believed that gold was present in California, but where exactly? Upon his return from Mexico, he decided to take steps to find out, even though he disliked the methods that were necessary. However, like all natural leaders, he had little patience for means that did not lead to the desired end. There was no middle ground when it came to making money. It would take a century for the country to become populated enough to give his extensive ranches a reasonable value. Although he owned 20,000 cattle, the market for selling them was limited, and bartering was the primary form of trade rather than using currency. Toward the end of the month, he hurried to Seal Bay to catch a ship that was about to sail for Mexico. He could no longer delay the important preparations for his future plans. The treacherous and vengeful nature of Samboro could awaken at any moment from the spell in which it was currently locked. If a ship had sailed earlier, he would have entrusted his commercial interests to his overseer and gone to the government immediately. He arrived in Seal Bay one evening after a long ride. The city was remarkably quiet. It was the time when the tireless dancers of that vibrant city should have passed by the open windows of the halls, when the atmosphere should have been filled with the sounds of modern music and laughter. But the city felt like a deserted place. The colorless buildings were still and silent like tombs. He rode slowly down Machado Street and noticed the approaching glow of a cigarette. When the cigarette was next to him, he recognized Mr. Larkin. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Smallpox," replied the consul briefly. "You better get on board immediately, and avoid the lower part of town. Your cowboy arrived yesterday, and I told him to take your luggage to the customs office. He dropped it and ran away to the countryside." Melendez thanked him and continued on his way. He took a detour to avoid the lower part of town, but noticed that it wasn't deserted. Lights were moving here and there. Poor people, he thought. They are probably dying like poisoned rodents. On the side of the hill by the road, there was a solitary hut. He had to pass by it. A candle was burning beyond the open window, and he clenched his jaw and turned his head. Not because of fear of contagion, though. And despite his strong determination, his eyes were drawn to the window. He looked once and then looked again, before stopping his horse. On the bed lay a girl in the middle stages of the disease, her eyes shining with delirium, her dark hair tangled and damp. She was clearly alone. Melendez urged his horse forward and galloped around to the back of the hut. In the kitchen, the only other room, an old woman, weathered and wrinkled like an old apple, was huddled. She was asleep. Next to her was a bottle of liquor. Melendez called out loudly to her, "Susanna!" The woman stirred but didn't open her eyes. He called out twice more, awakening her. She gazed through the open door, her jaw dropping, revealing the yellow, decayed teeth. "Who is it?" "Is Anita alone with you?" "Oh my, Don Jose, yes, yes. Everyone fled from the house like rats abandoning a burning ship." Oh my, and she was so beautiful before. Oh my." Her head slumped forward as she fell into a daze. Melendez rode back to the window. The girl sat on the edge of the bed, absent-mindedly pulling at her tangled hair. "Water, water," she weakly cried. "Oh, my Mary." She tried to get up but fell back, clutching at the bedclothes. Melendez rode to a nearby deserted shack, hid his saddle in a corner beneath a pile of trash, and set his horse free. He returned to the hut where the sick girl lay and entered the room. Despite her fever, she recognized him. "Don Jose, is it really you?" she said, partially lifting herself. "Oh, my Mary, is this delirium?" "It is me," he replied. "I will take care of you. Do you need water?" "Oh, my, water. Oh, my, you were always kind, even though your love lasted such a short while." He brought the water and did what he could to alleviate her suffering. Like all the ranchers, he had some knowledge of medicine. He held the old woman under the pump, gave her an emetic, broke her bottle, and instructed her to assist him in caring for the girl. With a mix of fear and the promise of money, she provided him with some help. Melendez observed the ship set sail the following morning, battling the urge to jump from the window, rent a boat, and catch up to it. A month's delay could mean the death of his aspirations. For all he knew, the vessel carried the letters that could ruin him. Samboro himself might be on board. He clenched his lips with a look of intense disdain, directed at his own powerlessness in the face of circumstance, and went to the girl's bedside. She was desperately ill. Even if there was any medical expertise in the area, it wouldn't be enough to save her. However, he couldn't bear to let this woman, who had been his lover for a mere week, die like an abandoned creature. She had loved him and never caused any trouble. They had maintained a friendly relationship, and he had assisted her whenever she had asked for his help. But now, in her time of great need, she had additional rights, and he acknowledged them. He had trimmed her hair short, which made her look more comfortable but still an unpleasant sight. As he observed her, thoughts of Selina flooded his mind, and a surge of love overwhelmed him like never before. Initially, he had been merely infatuated with her uniqueness and unconventional beauty. In Santa Barbara, her kindness and connection had seeped into his being, igniting a profound blend of passion and spiritual love that revitalized his dormant soul and stirred his masculinity in a way that lust never could. Now, in her absence and elevated status above ordinary mortals, he revered her as an ideal. Even in the bitterness of knowing that months would pass before he could see her again, the tenderness she had evoked from the depths of his serious nature pulsed through him, making him exceptionally kind to the unfortunate woman who couldn't possibly comprehend the depth of his feelings for Selina. She passed away within 3 days. The benevolent priest, faithfully fulfilling his duty and making a brief daily visit to each of his afflicted poor, prayed for her as she slipped into a state of unconsciousness, but she was unable to receive the last rites. Melendez was alone with her when she died, but the priest returned a few moments later. "Don Thomas Larkin wants me to tell you, Don Jose Melendez," said the father, "that he would be happy to have you stay with him until the next ship arrives. Since 2 members of his family have the disease, he has nothing to fear from you. I will take care of the body." Melendez gave him money for the burial and looked at him thoughtfully. The priest must have heard the girl's confessions, and he wondered why he did not take the opportunity to reprimand a man whose indifference to the church was a matter of angry discussion among the clergy. The priest seemed to understand his thoughts because he said, "You have done more than your duty, Don Jose, and I believe that the good God is merciful to the weaknesses of men. He made them. Go in peace." Melendez accepted Mr. Larkin's invitation, but despite the friendly company of the consul, he spent the most miserable 3 weeks of his life in his house. He could not leave Seal Bay until he had passed the incubation period, as he did not want to spread the disease. He also could not write to Selina for the same reason. What would she think?